Yes. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Presentation Skills 101 on this particular Sunday. Welcome to everybody. I'm seeing a lot of good mornings in the box. Everybody seems to be in a cheerful mood as we get started. We're at 94 participants right now. I'm hoping we touch the 200 mark. It almost feels like a cricket match where we're going to score runs. Okay, so let's dive straight into the subject because as usual, there is a hell of a lot to cover. And because this is a topic of extreme importance to one and all. So there's lots to cover and I want to dive straight into this particular topic. Okay, so first, just a few ground rules. All of y'all can read this particular slide. Okay, so the cameras and microphones have been disabled. Please type yes in the chat box if you can see the presentation and you can hear the facilitator clearly. Please type yes in the chat box if that is the case. This is going to be a 90-minute long session. I will take questions at the end of each module, and at the end of the class, like you know, at the end of the 90-minute mark, we have a special session which is called after class, where whatever questions can't get answered during this 90-minute framework, we take those questions there. So each and every person gets a question to an answer to their question. That's the after class is another 45 minutes at least is what we do. Use the to ask questions, ensure that you're using the Q&A section. So I will take questions only from the Q&A section. If you look below, you'll be able to find the Q&A section, and we're going to use the chat box basically for any exercises I may ask you to do or any responses that I may want from you. So that is going to be the use of the chat box, while all the questions need to come in the Q&A session. At the end of this particular session, we have assessment link. We have a little assessment that's going to happen, which is in the 90 minutes, where if you get 70% plus, you are going to get a lovely certificate from Work Better Training, which will acknowledge the fact that you cleared your assessment and will acknowledge the fact that you have been trained on the subject of presentation 101. Right? So please wait back for that particular assessment. Please get that assessment because it's very important if you attended this session on a Sunday morning to get the certificate as well. Okay. Now, before we proceed on to today's subject, I just want to throw light on the fact that this is one of 5 classes that we're going to have on the subject of presentation skills, right? Because from our 10 years of experience, 10, 12 years of being in this particular industry, we know that this is what one of people's biggest needs is. A lot of them want stuff around presentations, public speaking, because we have to make so many presentations of late, right? So we have 5 whole classes on this. Today is just one of those 5 classes on presentation skills, right? The next class that we have, I don't know the exact date. Y'all can check it on the calendar once you'll become members. But the one class that we have is on how to structure your content, right? When you're putting your presentation together. We have another topic on dealing with nervousness, because that is a big issue that a lot of people have. So I'm not going to be taking a lot of questions in this area of how to deal with nervousness because we have a whole separate class for that. We have a class on handling tough audiences, right? So how do you handle audiences that ask a lot of questions, that are very, very distracted? Again, we're not going to cover that in detail today. And the last one, after you sort out these 3 things, how do you become a presentation pro, right? How do you really start wowing your audience and meeting your objective, right? So these are the other 4 classes that we have through the year. Today's class is in a way an introduction to the subject of presentation skills. The first class of these 5 classes, it's an introduction on this subject, and we are going to cover a few basics on what needs to be done. We're going to try to address a few common misunderstandings that people have around this subject. A lot of it is misconceptions that people have lived with all their lives because they haven't had somebody good to kind of throw light or train them on this particular subject. So they have a lot of misconceptions around it. We're going to clear all of those things. So in a way, this class is like the 101 is the essentials of presentations. Okay, Just a minute, guys. Arunima, if anybody can't hear me, I'm not going to be opening the chat box all the time. So if anybody can't hear me, just let me know about it. Okay. Now, let's go on to defining this subject to start with, right? So what is a presentation? A presentation is, at least from the context of this workshop that we're doing, this class that we're doing, a presentation is nothing but one-to-many communication. Okay, that's a good way of looking at it. A presentation is nothing but your ability to communicate ideas to a group of people, and that could be done through when the group is sitting in front of you. Okay, it can be done even in settings like this where you're doing a Zoom call and you're addressing a lot of people. The presentations is nothing but one-to-many communication. You know, previously, before this word presentation came in, we would often call this subject, probably 15, 20 years back, we'd call this subject public speaking, right? Where you need to actually articulate your view, or articulate your ideas, or articulate your standpoint to many people who are either sitting in front of you or you're addressing it virtually, right? So that is what we're trying to get better at, because it is a very, very important skill. Okay, now as we get started, the first exercise that I have, and for this I want each one of you all to use the chat box, which is there, and the question to you is, why are presentation skills so important to your career? Right, that's what I want to know from all of you all, and I want you all to use the chat box in it, and for this answer I want you all to come up with any 3 to 5 points that you enter in the chat box there. Okay, you have 2 minutes to do that. Your time starts now. I have a lot of people giving me answers, saying to share information effectively. Guys, I know that it is to share information effectively, but that's not really my question. My question is, how are presentation skills important to your career? And another way to kind of look at this particular question is to ask yourself, if you're not good at presentations or making presentations, how does it impact your career badly, right? So I don't really want generic answers of saying to communicate ideas to people efficiently. That's what we know presentations are. My question to you is, what is going to be the result if you are bad at making presentations? How does it impact your career negatively? Or if you're good at presentations, how does that impact your career positively? So please think about those answers and put them up in the chat box, and not just generic answers on that subject, very specific to you. Okay, now a few people are giving answers which are more in line. We need to convey our points. Okay, Shibu has put his points across in a nice way. Okay, some good answers. Yes, some good answers. I want you all to keep thinking, how does it positively or negatively impact me or my life? I want you to, if I'm not good at this subject, how is it going to impact my life negatively? Okay, some good answers. I want everyone, when you're up using the chat box, even read some of the other answers so that you'll know what other people on this particular, in this particular class think about this subject. Okay, some good answers. Thank you very much for participating on a Sunday morning. Very, very happy to see the amount of answers that have come in. So why is presentation skills so important to your career? First of all, I think if anybody is worked in corporate India, or anybody has even, I think, anything above 5 years of experience, by now they have realized that what the importance of this particular subject is. They possibly understand the importance of communication skills, right, on a day-to-day basis, but they also realize the importance of presenting well. And a lot of people, you know, when I do workshops with them, a lot of people will say this thing where they say, you know, one of the reasons why I didn't make progress in my career is that I do very good work. Yeah, I know I do very good work, यार पर मेरा ना presentation ठीक से नहीं होता. I can't present myself properly. I can't present the work properly. I can't communicate the work properly to people, right? They always, I do good work, but I can't present it properly, and that kind of holds them back in their career. And the problem is, instead of fixing this particular problem, they keep complaining about this particular problem, and they keep praying in a way that somehow the management should see their work without them having to present that work properly to them. And I think the reality of the matter is, there's a very nice thought that says, right, deal with the world not as you would like it, but as the world is, right? And the reality of how the world is each and every person has to do very good work, has to bring in the results, but each and every person, in if you're working, needs to also be good at presenting that work to other people. And those other people could be different stakeholders. It could be your colleagues, it could be your senior management, it could be your vendors, it could be your customers, right? In a way, you think about it this way: you may have a great product, but even if you have a great product, and if you can't present that product well to other people and your potential customers are not going to know that you have a great product, right? They can't dream about the fact that you have a good product, right? So even if you have something great, it becomes extremely important for you to be able to present it well. And therefore, each one of you should take this particular subject very, very seriously, and actually get better at this particular subject, right? The second reason why presentation skills, in my mind, is very important to each one of y'all is that the more senior you become in the hierarchy in your particular company, a lot of leaders have said this to me, right? They've said, my entire job as a senior in this company, above middle management in this company, my entire job is either I'm giving presentations to people or I'm attending presentations, right? So it's literally the whole day, that's what I do: give presentations or attend presentations. Because the more senior you become, typically the lesser time you have, right? You're crunched for time, and the more the requirement for you to go out and speak one to many, right? Because you don't have the time to address things one-on-one, so you have to speak one to many. So if any one of y'all aspire to lead a team, if any one of y'all really aspire to go to the senior levels of management, your ability to communicate effectively one to many, your ability to communicate to a group, becomes very, very important. And by and large, I'm sure your experience will say the same thing, that 8 out of 10 people that go to the very top, I'm not saying 100%, but 8 out of 10 people that go to the very top of the corporate hierarchy, you will see that they have the ability to communicate very well, and you will see that they in turn have the ability to present their ideas, thoughts extremely well to people, right? So these are the few reasons why it is. Number one, you may be doing good work, but if you can't present that work properly, you're not going to shine in your organization. And that's just what the truth is, right? You can't change that particular fact of the matter. Number two, if you want to become a senior, if you want to get to leadership positions within your organization, you'll have to get good at addressing people one to many, right? That is the other reason, and that is the reason why presentation skills as a topic is so important to y'all, right? So if all of y'all, if y'all agree with me, give me a big yes in the chat box, so that I know we're on the same page as far as this particular issue is concerned, right? So big yes in the chat box, please. Very good. Thank you very much for all the enthusiasm and the big yeses from everyone. Thank you, guys. Thank you. Okay, now before I move on to this subject, I just thought of something that I wanted to share with you, right? So this was, I think, close to 5 or 6 years back, right? And I was doing a presentation skills workshop where we had 15 people sitting in the room with me, and I was kind of training them on how to get better on this subject. We were dealing with one of India's oil and gas majors, right? We were dealing with them, and these were the senior most people in that oil and gas major. So we had somebody from the maintenance team, right? The head of maintenance who kind of takes care of the entire oil and gas plant. He was actually running me through his presentation, right? So he was actually making the presentation to me for feedback on that particular presentation, and for me to give him tips on how to do better at it. And he had made such a terrible presentation, to be honest, right? So he was presenting it badly. The contents of his presentation were very, very bad, very, very unstructured. But after spending close to 20 minutes listening to his presentation very carefully and asking him a few questions, I realized that this particular gentleman had done a fantastic job in the last 1 year in the work that he did, right? So he had brought about a saving of over 20-25 crores, which was a big deal for that particular company. That he had brought about that particular saving. However, the way he was presenting and the content of his presentation was so poorly done that the audience at the end of that particular presentation didn't even know that this gentleman had led to close to a 25 crore rupee saving for that company in 1 year, right? That's how badly he was presenting. He had done great work, but he didn't even care to present those figures properly. And it's not like he didn't want to, right? He just didn't know how to. And then at the end of it, I asked him, because that's a presentation he had made a month back. I asked him to the extent, I said, do all the people in your peer group, do all the people in this organization actually know that you have clearly brought about a 25-30 crore saving for your company in 1 year? Do they know about it because of the work that you and your team has done? And the answer to that was no, they don't know about it. And now he, in his mind, started thinking, oh, nobody's acknowledging my work. Nobody's actually, taking what I'm doing seriously. And I just turned that around and I said, no, please don't blame your peers for it. Please don't blame your management for it. You are such a poor presenter that they have no idea of the good work that you've done, although that you spent 1 year doing that good work with your team, right? So it's not their fault, it's your fault, right? That you are not presenting the matter well, right? And that's an example in a way of what most people end up doing at the workplace, right? So that's why it is such a important skill for us. Now, so we've just discussed the importance of presentation. Now, this is a slide that is extremely important. So I want all of you all to pay very close attention to this particular slide. There are 5 points here. Okay, they're going to come one by one. But these 5 points, in a way, are going to clear a lot of your misconceptions around the topic of business presentations, right? So I want you all to pay careful attention. If you even understand these 5 points, right, if you actually understand them, this alone is going to be enough for you to start making better presentations. Okay, so pay careful attention. Now, the first point, the truth about business presentations is that most people in the room are too preoccupied with other things when you're speaking, right? That's the first truth of business presentations. Now, what do I mean by this? I mean that if you are going into a room to present to people, the audience is always going to be preoccupied with something else, right? Nobody enters a room thinking, I'm going to go for this presentation and really pay a lot of attention, right? People rarely enter any room from that point of view, right? Because everybody is so busy with their own work, right? Everybody has got some fire somewhere or the other in their personal and professional life that they have to douse, that they have to put off, that when they're coming for a presentation, more often than not, they're not fully there, right? They're preoccupied with their own thing, right? However, when you, the presenter, are going up to present, you in a way feel that the entire world is looking at you. You feel that the entire world is focused on you, where that is not the case, right? Most people, when they come to attend a presentation, are thinking when they're going to get out of that presentation and go home, right? That's what their thought is. They're least concerned about anything else. They just wanted to get over and done with and move, right? So that's the first thing that all of us should remember when we're going to make a presentation, that people are preoccupied with their own things, right? Now, I often share this kind of example here. I used to work in a company called L'Oreal. That was my first job, and the first presentation that I ever had to make. I just joined the company, but for some reason, the MD of L'Oreal was a very, very senior person, was sitting in that particular room, right? He was part of my audience. And this particular MD was a very jovial, fun guy otherwise, right? He was always in high spirits. But in that particular morning, he didn't look too happy, right? He looked very, very grim. And I was making a presentation, and when I was making a presentation, I was looking at his face, and he looked so grim and almost angry. And I got really, really worried, right? And I started, of course, getting more and more nervous, and I started screwing up my presentation that I was making, right? And somehow I got through with it. It was a 20-minute presentation. He didn't ask me any questions or nothing of that sort. But because of that particular nervousness, I did a very bad job while presenting. So over and done with. In the evening, I had to go into his cabin to get a signature of his on something that I needed. And when I entered his cabin, again, he looked kind of grim. He didn't look too happy. He didn't look in the best of spirits. He had the same expression that he had when I was making a presentation in the morning. So we had an equation where we could actually talk to him, right? So I asked him, I said, sir, is everything good? Are you feeling well? So he was like, he blurted out saying, he said, Swapnil, what do I tell you, right? I got my son's 10th standard results this morning, early morning, and my son is fared so poorly in his exams. He's done so badly, right? So the thought that came into my head was, in the morning when he actually entered the room as an audience to attend my presentation, it's not like he was really concentrating on my presentation. He was preoccupied with some personal problem of his, and his facial expression in a way was a result of that particular preoccupation that he had. It wasn't really about me, right? So a lot of times when people are going to come in the audience, know that they're going to be preoccupied with their own things, right? Another case point here for you. See, if you're making a presentation and somebody's on their laptop, listen, as an audience, for you to be on a laptop when somebody is presenting to you is not a very respectful thing to do. Okay, there's no doubt about that. If you're the audience, you shouldn't be looking into your phone, you shouldn't be looking into your laptop. There's no doubt that that is behavior which is not acceptable. However, if you are the presenter and somebody does look at his laptop or does look into his phone, please don't think that you are screwing up, you are doing something bad. It's because of you. Don't make it all about you, right? It's probably because something else has come which is much more urgent that you don't know about on the personal or professional side, right? So this is the first kind of truth of business presentation, that most people in the room are too preoccupied with other things. Okay, now this is the second truth of business presentations. People remember very little from presentations made, right? Just very, very little. Now, what do I mean by this? um, I'll give you an example of this, right? I'll give you this example in jest. um, think of even if I make this presentation to you for an hour and a half, right? And at the end of that hour and a half, if you don't make a lot of notes, and if I ask you after an hour and a half of talking, if I ask you, what are the few things that you picked up from this particular presentation? After an hour and a half of talking, you will barely be able to pick 2 or 3 things, right, out of what you learned from this particular presentation. And there's nothing which is wrong with you. This is how all human beings are. From whatever presentations are made, our mind picks up very, very little from it, right? And a good way to look at how our minds are more like sieves. I don't know the Hindi, what's the Hindi word for sieve? You don't know? Okay, where we put tea and coffee, sieve, right? So our minds are more like sieves with little holes in them, than they are like buckets, right? So when you put a lot of stuff in that sieve, most of it comes down, and a little bit of it remains on top. And that's exactly how our minds are, right? Most of it just goes and very little remains in our brains, right? So most people remember very, very little from presentations. Now, if you don't trust me, try this fun experiment yourself, right? So if you make a presentation, say to your colleagues, whenever you all get back to office, or over Zoom for that matter, it doesn't matter where you all are doing the presentation. If you make a presentation to your colleagues, and you have like a very close friend of yours who's part of the audience. After you make that particular presentation, after say 5 or 10 minutes of you making that presentation, just go and tap on your friend's shoulder and ask him saying, hey, what did I say in this particular presentation? Can you actually tell me what I discussed? And I can tell you, if you made an hour-long presentation, he'll barely be able to tell you one or two things, right, from what you said in that presentation. That's how much he remembers from that presentation, right? Now, if you ask him, if you ask your friend, say after 4 hours about the presentation, right? You made the presentation in the morning, you ask him by noon, you say, hey, remember in the morning I made a presentation for you and your colleagues. What did I say in that presentation? If you ask him that question, he'll barely be able to tell you one thing. Okay. And the third instance is, if you made a presentation in the morning and say, if you speak to your colleague at 5 o'clock in the evening and you ask him the question, hey, I made a presentation in the morning. What did I say in that presentation? Your colleague will actually ask you, did you really make a presentation? You'll be like, mujhe yaad bhi nahi hai. I don't even remember that you made a presentation this morning, right? Because so much has happened since morning that I don't even remember the fact that you made a presentation in the morning, right? That's how concerned I am with my life. I'm not really concerned with your life, right? So the truth of the matter is, people pick up very little from presentations made, right? That's just the way the human mind is. Okay. So that's why, just a few of the things that you need to do in your presentation. You need to ensure that you keep the points limited, because there's a very nice quote that says, the more I tell you, the less you're going to remember. Right. So you really need to identify what's most important and just focus on those things. It's very important for you to structure your presentation properly, which we're going to learn in another class, so people know exactly what you've said in that particular presentation. It's extremely important for you to constantly remind them, through summaries at the end of the section, on what you said, for even something to stick in that human brain of your audience, right? So this is the second big truth of business presentations, right? Now, the third big truth of business presentations is, people have very limited time, right? As a matter of fact, a lot of people that have a lot of time also believe that they have limited time, right? Because all of us today can stay busy by Facebooking, Instagramming, being on the news all the time, indulging ourselves in stupid discussions around stuff we have no idea about. So we can always find ourselves busy doing something or the other, checking email, right? So you don't even need to be really busy to feel that you're busy, right? But most people have very, very limited time at their disposal, right? But if you think of it, when we're actually making a presentation, we don't think like that. When we're actually making a presentation, हम हमेशा सोचते हैं इस presentation में और क्या डाल सकते हैं. That is our thought, which is often there, right? What else can I put in the presentation? And your audience often wants you to remove stuff from presentations, right? So that's what your audience wants. Typically, if you're going to present to your colleagues, especially if you're in office, I'm sure even over Zoom, and again, one of your close friends is part of the audience, I think the first question that every close friend of mine has ever asked me, he always asks the question, I'm sure the same is the case in your case, the same is the thing in your case, they'll ask you, slide kitne hai? How many slides are there, right? And it doesn't matter what answer you give people, right? So if you say there are 50 slides, they'll be like, hey, 50, 25 nahi ho sakte kya? Right? If you say 25 slides, they'll say 25 slides, can't they be 11? So whatever the amount of slides that you put out, your audience always wants half of them, right? That's a good rule to keep in mind. They always want half the presentation. But while making a presentation, we're never thinking like that. While making a presentation, we're always thinking, what else can I put in this particular presentation? How else can I make it longer, bigger, when your audience wants just the bang opposite of that, okay? So one of the things that we are going to do in this series of 5 classes that we're going to do is, our objective is to try to get you to think more like the audience and less like the presenter, right? That is one of the things that we want to do, because the minute you start thinking from an audience's point of view for whom you're making the presentation, the more you start thinking from the audience's point of view and not from the presenter's point of view, you are going to do a far better job of presenting. But we are often stuck in the presenter's mind, although 90% of the time we are the audience, but somehow when we're making a presentation, we rarely think about the audience, and we keep thinking about ourselves and all our worries, all our apprehensions, all our desperations. We are looking at all of those things, and therefore we're not paying enough attention to the audience while doing it, right? So I want all of us to start thinking a little more like the user, a little more like the consumer, a little more like the audience, and less as the person presenting. I hope that thought made sense to you. If it made sense to you, give me a big yes in the chat box. I want to see that we're on the same page. Yeah, I think this is resonating. Please, when you're address all panelists and attendees, all panelists and attendees. There is a 2 in your chat box which has all attendees and panelists. Amazing. I'm happy to see that we're on the same page on this particular thing. Is okay. Now, okay, so this is another very, very big truth of business presentation, which is that everyone is nervous, right? Even people that you think are not nervous about making presentations are very, very nervous, right? Now, you need to listen carefully for you to understand what I mean. I am somebody whose job is to present, right? As a teacher, I am presenting all the time to different audiences. Although I present every day, so in this kind of a session that I'm doing right now, I can't lie to you, I'm not nervous at all, right? And in most kind of rooms that I go to, I'm not nervous at all, because I've been doing this for the past 10, 12 years. And because I've been doing it so often, I don't really get nervous anymore. However, if I have to go and say present in some forum that in my mind I find prestigious, or in my mind I think that particular forum is of huge importance, right? Where I've been called to speak, before I go on to stage, although I do this almost every day, before I go on stage, I will still be nervous, right, about that, because I may not be nervous in this situation because I've done it so often, but when I'm put in another situation, even though I've done this so often, I will still feel nervous, right? A lot of your leaders that often you find as being very, very confident when they're dealing with you, when they're kind of when they're presenting with you, they're very, very confident, and you're thinking, man, you know, I'm the only guy who gets nervous, or I'm the only person that gets nervous while presenting. And look at my leader, how well he's presenting. He never gets nervous. The same thing with him. He's probably so used to presenting in that situation. He's probably so used to presenting to you that he doesn't get nervous anymore in that particular situation. But if you take him out of that situation, and if you put him in a situation where, say, he's in front of the shareholders of the company, or he's in some very, very other important forum where he's supposed to present, he's going to be feeling nervous as well, right? Because feeling nervous when you're presenting to people is a very human thing. So I don't want any of y'all, we have close to 215 people on a Sunday morning attending this session, right? So I don't want any of the 215 people feeling at any point of time when you need to present. And if you feel nervous, I don't want you feeling at any point of time thinking, oh, I'm the only person that feels nervous. How do I feel nervous? I shouldn't be feeling nervous. No, 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 no. Everybody feels nervous, right? I often tell people, if you're going to go and if you need to present in an important forum and you don't feel nervous, chances are that you're dead and your ghost is presenting there, right? Because as long as you're alive, every time you present in a forum, you are going to feel that little bit of nervousness. And I know from whatever research I've read that little bit of nervousness is extremely important also for you to perform better, right? Because you start taking your presentation a lot more seriously. So that little bit of nervousness is very, very important. But if that nervousness blows out of proportion, that's not a good thing for you all, right? And that's why we have a separate class just to deal with nervousness as an issue, right? We put something exactly for you there. Okay, so everybody is nervous. I want you all to know that, which is a big truth, right? And the last truth of presentations is this, right? Everybody can become good at making presentations. Everybody can be good at public speaking, right? So this is something that I want everybody to know. Again, you may think I'm just saying this as a form of encouragement. So I want to tell you a couple of things around this, right? For years, I've been doing this particular workshop, and when you go through all 5 classes of this and you follow what we tell you to do, I can assure you that very, very soon you will become a much better presenter. Right now, listen carefully. Each and every person is naturally better at certain things, right? And some things come to you a little more naturally, and some things don't come to you a little more naturally. Now, what do I mean by that? The 200 odd people attending this session, I'm sure for a lot of y'all, for a few of y'all, numbers, right? Or maths or numbers or calculation, those are things that come to your mind very, very easily. It's not that you had to do any other special practice for it, right? Ever since you were a kid, you were comfortable with numbers. Somebody like me, I'm not comfortable with numbers. I've never been comfortable with numbers, right? That's not something that comes to me naturally. Of course, I had to learn it, because if I had to run a business, I had to learn it to ensure that I am effective at it to a certain degree. I'm no expert at it, right? But that's something that came to a lot of you all naturally. It didn't come to me naturally. So exactly like this, on this topic of presentation, probably the ability to communicate well, the ability to present well comes naturally to a few people, and of course they need to work on it to make it better. And for a few people it may not be that natural, right? For them to present well, for them to stand in front of people, it may not be that natural. I am acknowledging that. But irrespective of which category you fall in, if you feel it comes naturally, or if you don't feel it comes naturally, the truth of the matter is presentation skills is a skill like anything else. It's exactly like if you've learned how to swim. A lot of y'all were natural at swimming, which means you went and within 2 or 3 classes you got the hang of swimming and you learned how to swim, right? Very, very quickly. 2 or 3 classes it took. For a lot of y'all, it probably took 10 classes, right, to get better at swimming, right? For some people it took 2, for some people it took 10. However, both people at the end of it could learn how to do it, and both people could do it fairly well. The same thing is true in presentation. For some people, they may pick it up a little earlier. For some people, they may pick it up a little later, right? But all of us can get good at presentations if we put in the work. However, none of us are going to get good at presentations if we don't put in the work, right? What happens with most people is, if I give you the swimming example, most people quit. If you quit the class in the 3rd class, right, and don't wait till the 10th class, and then you complain about not knowing how to swim, the problem is not the swimming pool, the problem is not the water, the problem is not the swimming coach, the problem is you, because you're a quitter. You quit after the 3rd class. You would have gotten better after the 10th one, because you kept looking at that guy who was a natural at swimming, who got better at with 3 classes, and you said, how am I not good at swimming? Look at him, he picked it up in 3 classes. No, 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 you and him are different. Every human mind is as different as every human face, right? So you had to wait till the 10th class, but you didn't wait for it. And that's what's happened with most of y'all. That's the reason why y'all have not improved this skill of presenting well, right? Because whether it comes to you naturally or not, you need to put in the effort. And if you put in the effort, there will be no stopping you from becoming a good presenter. Again, I'm not talking about, you don't need to reach the efficiency and effectiveness of presenting like a Barack Obama or a Modi or most of these world leaders that need to public speak and present every hour of the day. You don't need, I'm not saying that you will become like them, but you can definitely become a very big success in your corporate life and present very well in that particular context. So if you agree with me, if you think I'm making sense, please type a big yes in the chat box so that I know that we're on the same page. Thank you. Thank you. Makes sense, right? Ramnath is saying make a little progress every day. Absolutely. That's the key. You never jump into the pool for the first time and become a swimming pro all of a sudden, right? If you want to get good at swimming, it's the effort that you need to put in every day. If you have children for that matter, and if you send them for to play badminton, you don't expect your child to become a badminton pro all of a sudden, right? It's going to take some time for him to get better. It's going to take those classes. It's going to take that effort. Somehow when it comes to our children, we know what to do. Somehow when it comes to them, we have all the right advice to give, but very often we don't give ourselves that same advice, right? So yeah, if you agree with me, please, a big yes. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Now I'm just going to quickly look into the questions. We have one question that has come up. I'm going to address this particular question later, and I'm going to take this up later because now I want to go on with this particular presentation. Yeah, good. Some good answers. Yes. Good to see everybody participating. How many people are we? We're 215. Very good. Okay. Now, in this particular class, we are only going to focus our energies on three things. That's the things that we're going to focus on. That's it. Three things for this particular class. And then through the rest of the classes, we're going to continue our effort, right? So the three things that we're going to focus on in this particular class is this: the presentation mindset. That's something that we're going to focus on. A few thoughts and misconceptions that people have, I want to clear that. I'm sure through the truth of presentation, a few of them have already gotten cleared. Number two, we're going to focus on the presentation body language. If you all had attended the class that we did on body language and speaking, we covered this, but we're going to get into a little more detail on specifically what your body language needs to be when you present. And the third one is we're going to discuss. The third one is a big one, huh? Delivering the presentation. There's a lot of stuff to be discussed there, and we're going to, of course, discuss it through all our classes. But we're going to give you a few important tips on delivering your presentation well, right? So there's a lot of things for you to take back from this thing. I hope all of you all have started this class with a notepad in your hand. We're going to send you a summary sheet, but you know that your own notes, as we tell our children, are far more important than anything else, right? So I hope that you're making copious notes during this particular presentation, right? So let's move on to topic number one here. Let's move on to the presentation mindset, right? Now, three thoughts here, right, in terms of the presentation mindset. I think the point 1A we just discussed to a fair degree. The only way you get better at making presentations is by making more of them, right? This is the one big mindset change that you need to bring. The only way any of y'all are going to get better at this subject is by making more presentations. You are never going to get good at presentations by avoiding presentations, and that's what we tend to do. Most of us hope to get better at presenting by avoiding presentations, right? That's hoping to get better at batting by avoiding batting, or hoping to get better at badminton by not playing badminton at all, right? You're never going to become a better batsman by just watching batting on TV, right? It's important for you to see how the good players play, but in the end, it's important for you to go on the field and actually play. Exactly like that. You're never going to get good at presentations if you just watch good speakers, if you just attend classes like this and never actually take the effort of doing it yourself. So there's a simple rule: the more you present, the better you're going to get, right? Okay, now therefore what each one of y'all need to do, and I want y'all to give this thought. We don't have enough time for y'all to put this on your chat box, but I really want y'all to give this some thought, is if you want to get good at presentations, you need to take every opportunity that you need to get. You need to take that particular opportunity to present, right? That's the only way you're going to get better at presentations. You need to literally seize every opportunity which is there, right? Nobody's going to come and give it to you. Okay, you need to seize those opportunities to present and public speak, and that could be in your personal life, or that could be in your professional life as well. And the thing to remember is, when you're trying to get good at something, you're not going to be very good at the start. And that's what the problem is. Most of us aren't good at presentations or public speaking. So towards the start of our journey of getting better, we're not good and we give up very, very quickly. But we're not good at anything when we start, more often than not. If you're learning how to drive, the first few classes, you don't expect to just sit on the wheel and learn how to drive, right? You're not going to be good at it. You need to get through that period in order for you to get good at it. And most people, the reason why they never get good at presentations is because they hate the first 5, the first 10 times of them being so bad and people looking at them when they're so bad. So they avoid making presentations and they never get better at it through a lifetime, although they know that the ability to communicate well is an important leadership skill. They know that, but they avoid it like a plague, right? So you're never going to get good at it until you do more of it. Know that there is no way around that particular point. That's the mindset that you need to go with. Number 2 mindset that you need to go with is, I need to create every opportunity that I have to make a presentation. Unless I create every opportunity to make a presentation, I'm not going to get good at it. Okay. Now, let me give you a little bit around this. Let's assume it's going to take you 30 presentations to actually become a presentation pro, right? 30 practice presentations to become a presentation pro. Let's assume that you seize every opportunity that you get to make a presentation, and you finish those 30 presentations within 2 years, right? So then within 2 years, you finish doing 30 presentations. So you're almost presenting more than once a month to people, right? So that's a lot of practice. So you finish doing those 30 presentations within a period of 2 years. As again, somebody that's going to avoid making presentations. So they'd probably make 2 presentations in a year, right? So now it's going to take them 15 years to get better. So one person seized every opportunity to make a presentation and made 30 presentations within 2 years. Another person avoided every chance of making a presentation and now will probably do 30 presentations in 8 or 10 years, right? So therefore, one guy gets better within 2 years, one guy gets better possibly after 10 years, because it's not even a concentrated effort towards it, right? And this is how we don't get good at presentations, right? So we need to change our mindset, and we need to make it a mindset of creating every opportunity. Now, what do I mean by create every opportunity, right? I'll give you a few tips because I don't have the time to question you here. Creating opportunities for yourself means that if there is within your organization, if there is any chance of, say, doing some training program, right, within your organization, because when you're training people, you're often talking to people one to many. There's a lot that you need to communicate. Volunteer to do any training work within your company, right, or any knowledge sharing work. Volunteer to do that. Put your hand up as, you know, I'd like to do a session on this. So let me give you an example. Maybe you learned a lot of things in your free time about COVID. Right now, you've done a lot of research around it, and maybe you're going to get back to work. So maybe you can volunteer and tell your organization that, listen, you know, I want to actually make a presentation to all my colleagues on what are the do's and don'ts when we get back to the workplace. Right? I've done a lot of study on that. Let me put a presentation together, and I would like to do that. So that now you're creating an opportunity for yourself to actually practice your presentation skills. Are you getting my point? Right? This is the way to do it. Now, if you and your boss, say, are going for some meeting to an important client or an important stakeholder, you know, be the one to ask your boss, saying, boss, can I present today? And maybe your boss will say no. The next time that you're going again, raise your hand and say, boss, can I try to present today? You'll say no. By the third or fourth time, you'll say, okay, present, right? Or you'll say, okay, present one part of it. I will present the other part of it. But if you're not actually going to raise your hand and ask him again and again and again, right, he's not going to give you those particular chances. So that's again a way of you creating an opportunity for you to present all the time, right? In your personal life, what are creating opportunities for you to present? Say if it's your child's birthday party, right, and you've invited a lot of your family people over. Maybe you make a small little speech. Please don't make a long speech and bore all the family members, right? We don't want long, boring speeches. I'm not talking about that. But maybe you get a little bit of public speaking practice by going up there on stage or whatever, going in front of everybody and saying a few words, probably for 5 to 8 minutes, right? And practicing there. If you're going to a child's school and there's something there where you need to kind of teach or speak in front of everybody, take that particular opportunity to do it, because the more and more and more you get onto a platform where people are looking at you, the more you will get used to it. And the more you get used to it, the better you will start doing it. But unless you start creating those opportunities, my friends, there is no way you're getting better at it. There is no way you're getting better at the subject of presentation just by coming for this particular workshop. No, that's the equivalent of thinking that you're going to get a great body just by paying for the gym, right? You don't. You have to put in the hard work yourself after that, after learning from the gym instructor what needs to be done, right? That's my favorite example. Okay, so the only way of getting better at making presentations is by making more of them. Now, point number 2, the right mindset. Most of our problem in life, not just presentations, is our constant focus on what are other people thinking about me, right? This is not just about presentation, but just in life. What are other people thinking about me? What is my aunt thinking about me? What is my uncle thinking about me? What is my aunt's dog thinking about me? Everybody worried about what everybody is thinking about you. And the fact of the matter is, nobody's thinking about you, right? Because nobody cares enough, right? They're busy thinking about themselves. They've got no time to think about you. Once in a while, because they have nothing else to talk about, they may talk about you, but that doesn't mean that they really care about you, right? And they're not constantly thinking about you. There's a very nice quote that says, in my 20s, I thought everybody was thinking about me. By the time I got to my 40s, I realized nobody was thinking about me. By the time I got to my 60s, I realized that most people were so busy thinking about themselves that they never really had the time to think about me, right? So the more constantly we're focused on what people are thinking about me, we are not going to be able to achieve anything even otherwise, but especially not in presentation, right? So the reason why most people are not good at making presentations because they're so focused on impressing people. They're so focused on saying that, "Arey, main hero lagna chahta hu. I want to be a hero or heroine in front of these people," right? And they're so focused on that. And from today onwards, my simple suggestion to you is stop focusing on impressing people, right? Stop focusing on creating some kind of a wow impact in front of them. Stop having this mindset that, people need to clap at the end of my presentation and, that needs to happen. No, that is not going to happen. The only thing that you need to focus on is how do I get my message across to people in a very powerful, strong way, right? How do I get my message across to people? That's it. And concentrate on that particular message to get that across in a strong way. Do not put your energies towards trying to impress people, right? And the minute you shift your mind from trying to impress people to actually wanting to get your message across to people in a strong way, that itself is a big change in terms of your mindset towards making presentations. Okay, so that's a big one. I'm sure you all will have questions around each one of these things, and we're going to take up the questions after we're done with this. So if you have a question, please put it in the Q&A section and I will take them up at the end of this particular presentation, right? But if you are going to forget your own question, put it there, because like I mentioned, if we don't manage to cover your questions within this 90 minutes, we have a whole after class for you, right? Where we're going to spend 45 minutes just answering your questions, all the questions in for today's topic. The rest of the questions we'll take up in the other classes. Okay. So the second thing towards mindset is do not try to impress people. Focus on getting the message across to your audience, right? Because the minute you try to impress people, not going to work. Now, the third thing, very important point again. Okay. Develop a mentality of work in progress versus this is a big moment. Okay. Now, listen very carefully. So when I typically ask people, and we're going to deal with this in detail in the class on how to deal with nervousness around presentation. When I typically tend to ask people, what makes you nervous? Why do you get so nervous around making presentations? Okay, so then they'll say, yeah, I'm worried about what people will think. I'll say, okay, you're worried about what, who in specific are you worried about what they're going to think? And very often they'll be like, if I have my colleagues and especially my boss sitting, I'm very worried about, what he's going to think. I said, okay, how does it matter what he's going to think? Then they start thinking and then they say, how does it matter? Because if I present badly, maybe I'll get a bad appraisal. Okay, so basically a lot of our fears around presentation revolve around this idea of, oh, what are people going to think? But a lot of our fears revolve around this particular idea is how is making a bad presentation going to impact my career, right? So will I be giving the wrong impression? How will it impact my career? So that is one. And although people don't actively say it, that is a big kind of fear that they have, that if people discover that I'm a poor communicator, if people discover I'm a bad presenter, how does that have negative consequences for it, right? So what I end up telling people is this. You must know by now that at the workplace, 8 out of 10 people are poor presenters, right? So if you think you're a poor presenter, you're in the majority, 80%, right? Of people are poor presenters or not great presenters. So you're not the only person sailing in this particular boat. Okay, that's number one. Number two, if you want to know how to do well in your career, how to get in great appraisal, we have a class for that specifically on how to get a great appraisal. But if you want to know how to get a great appraisal, it's not going to be based in terms of how you make one presentation or whether you screw up on one presentation during the year, right? You get a good appraisal or you do well in your career based on the effort and your ability to bring results consistently, right? So that is the key to career success, your ability to bring results consistently to your boss, to your company. That's how you make progress. It's not based on how you're going to make one presentation, right? So understand that one presentation that you make is not this big moment which is make or break, because every time you go to present, say if you're going to an important client, to present your thoughts on it, You can't go saying, oh, you know, this is a make or break moment for you. That listen, even if you don't get that client, it's not like your company is going to collapse, or it's not like you are going to collapse to never have a job again in your life, right? So stop putting so much of pressure in that one moment on that one presentation, because the truth of the matter is no one presentation, however big you may think that presentation is, no one presentation is going to make or break your career. You may at that moment think that it will make or break your career, but it's not going to make or break your career. What is going to make your or break your career is your ability to get results consistently on a day-to-day basis, right? So that is the key, not how you make one presentation. Therefore, what your mindset needs to be towards presenting is you need to have a work in progress philosophy to presenting. Now, what that work in progress philosophy means is you need to acknowledge, if you think you're not a good presenter, you need to acknowledge that, okay, as I stand today, I am not the best presenter. So be honest and truthful about it. I'm not the best presenter. However, I need 25 to 30 presentations that I need to make, right, for me to get better, right? And you need to treat each one of your presentations as one of those 25, 30 presentations that you need to make to eventually get better at presentation, right? So from today onwards, when you're presenting, you're not going to think, oh, this is a big presentation, I need to impress people, this is a big moment for me. You're not going to think like that. You're going to think, I'm not that good at presentations. I acknowledge that. However, I've learned during the presentation 101 that if I have to get better at presentations, I need to make more of them, right? So the next 25, 30 presentations that each one of you all will make will be towards getting better in a couple of years. Not right now. It will be towards getting better in a couple of years. And the minute you kind of remove that pressure of this being that one big presentation, you'll be able to control your nerves. You'll be able to present in a way which is a lot better than otherwise, than if you put pressure on yourself. The number one important thing, if you want to make good presentations, is your ability to be comfortable, is your ability to feel confident, is your ability to control your nerves, right? You're always going to be nervous, but do you have the ability to live with your nervousness and give a presentation, or are you going to let your nervousness totally kill you, right? And if do whatever it takes to make yourself comfortable, and if you keep thinking this is a big moment, if you keep thinking this is a make or break presentation, which it's not, it's a misconception in your head, you're never going to be able to make good presentations, right? If any of y'all agree with me on this particular point, that we need to have this work in progress mentality, if you agree with me, please put a yes in the chat box. I want to see a big yes. Oh, glad to have so many big yeses. Thank you very much for the great participation, guys. You are totally on board. Good, 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 good. You know, just one more thing before we go on to this particular thing. You know, I hope each one of y'all, and that's my prayer today. I hope each one of y'all actually takes a lot of these things seriously and wants and desires to get better at presenting or public speaking from today. Because in a lot of research that has been done around this particular subject, it is seen that people all around the world, this is not just you, not just India, all around the world, one of people's biggest fears is the fears to present or speak in front of people, right? So it is one of people's biggest fear. There was a funny research. Now, I don't know the validity of this particular research, so please don't hold me by it, right? I just saw it randomly on the internet. So there was this research that said that people are, they get scared more of presenting and public speaking. They get scared more of that, more than even the fear of fire or water or heights or any of these things, right? So presentation skills was literally a bigger fear for people than any of those fire, water, heights that we typically think of, fears that people have, right? So that's how big a fear it is. And a big and, I hope you're listening, and a big and, if you take, if the 200 people here take the effort from today of actually getting better at presentation. And all of y'all will, if you put in the hard work, right? If you put in the work, all of y'all will get better at presenting. If you manage to get better at presenting, that will make you feel so confident that you can get over any fear that you have. You will feel so confident that you can handle any adversity, any problem, any situation. If you go from not being good at presenting to be good at presenting, if all of us can work together on that particular thing, and I'm going to be taking all the classes on presenting because I know how important this subject is to you, right? And if we can go from not being that good at presenting to being good at presenting, I can tell you, you will feel, each one of the 200 people here will feel that you can conquer any fear that you have, right? If you just get over this one fear, you will feel that you can conquer any fear that you have, and it will boost your confidence tremendously like absolutely nothing will, right? So I really want each one of y'all to put in the work that is required to get over this particular fear and kind of let your confidence come out after this, right? So that's how important this particular topic is. And I really hope each one of y'all is with me on this particular journey, right, of getting better. As a matter of fact, I used to be so scared of public speaking while growing up, right? I remember being in school where I would want to participate in the, what was called elocution contest then. I would want to participate in the debate competitions, right, when I was in school. But I would get so scared of being in front of people. That would be my worst fear of doing it, right? And I happened to tell my mother about it, and my mother was so kind, and between my 10th and 11th standard, she sent me for what was then called a public speaking course, right? Exactly, a class like this. And that was the start of me kind of getting better at it from that time. And I made use of that particular time. And a lot of my friends from school find it very, very funny because I've not been in touch with them for a long time, and they know the version of Swapnil that was in school that couldn't say a word. And so they're very, very surprised that I practically do this for a living, where I need to teach on these particular subjects, right? So somebody can go from not being good at it to being good at it, and at any age, right? It's got nothing to do with, okay, I started young. It helped that I started young, but it doesn't matter how old you are, right? As long as you take the effort from today to get better. It doesn't matter whether you're young or old to drive, right? Irrespective of what age you are, you can drive. It doesn't matter whether you're young or old to swim. Exactly like this. This is a skill like any of those. It doesn't matter how young or old you are to better your communication, to better your presentation skills, right? Okay, so let's go towards the presentation body language. Okay, and let's see what we have in store for you here. Okay, now a few points you need to listen carefully. Okay, first tip to y'all if you're making a presentation is sit or stand as close to your audience as possible. Okay, so if you see this particular man on the screen, he's standing very close to the table, very close to the audience. Now, what most people tend to do is people tend to stand close to the screen on which things are projected, right? They tend to stand close to it, and there's a big distance often between the presenter and the audience, right? And that doesn't work, because what your audience wants you to do is they want to feel your energy. They want to hear you loud and clear, right? And therefore you want to stand or sit as close to their audience as possible, and don't go close to the screen. Okay, this is a very important tip. I've seen for years people getting this wrong, right? Now I'll just show you. Okay, a lot of y'all will present in conference rooms. Okay, and I'm gonna quickly show y'all. I'll just do a very bad drawing, but I will show y'all that anyway. Okay, so here, let's assume that this is, sorry. Okay, so let's assume that this is your conference table and this is where the screen is. Okay, and these are all the chairs which we have. Okay, these are all the chairs. Okay, now this is where the screen is. Now let's assume that for this particular presentation, when you're making it, only 4 people have come, right? So you have somebody occupying this seat. It's a big table though. Okay, somebody is occupying this seat, somebody is occupying this seat, and somebody is occupying this seat, right? So this is your audience. They've taken up these particular 4 seats. Now, this is where the screen is. Okay, so do not stand here and present to them, right? This is an absolute no, right? What you should be doing is you should be standing or sitting here, which is as close to this particular audience as possible. Do not stand close to the screen, right? Now, depending on where the cables are and the wires are and stuff, in most conference room, I know that, you know, you'd have a box here, you'd have a box here. So you'd be able to pull the wire and have your laptop here to present, right? You'd be able to do that, right? So that's possible. Even for some reason, if you have to keep your laptop here, you should have one of those slide changers that you would have seen, right? So again, you can be very, very close to the audience when you're speaking to them and you're not very, very distant, right? So that's something that you need to keep in mind. I hope that makes sense to everyone. I hope everybody's clear about that. Okay, now the next point. A few things, these are some questions that people often have, right? Should I be sitting and presenting? Should I be standing and presenting, right? So this is a question people have. And the answer to that is do what makes you feel more comfortable. So if you feel more confident to stand and present, please stand and present. If you feel more comfortable to sit and present, please sit and present, right? A lot of people, have seen so many people always stand and present, so they feel they need to stand and present, and you don't necessarily need to do it. If you like sitting and present, please sit and present. When I am presenting, I'm typically presenting to, so which is my other point. The only time when you're supposed to stand and not sit is if you have very large audiences, right? So typically if you have an audience of around, you know, anything from 10 to 15 people, even 20 for that matter, if you sit and present, absolutely fine. And in 8 out of 10 cases, your audiences will be within the 15 people mark. They're not going to be more than that, right? So you can sit and present. However, if you have an audience which is 20, 25, say 100 people for that matter, then you can't sit and present. And again, the simple logic for why you can't do it is that in most cases, people are not going to be able to see you, right? If you're going to sit, and if you have so many people in the room, they need to be able to see you. And therefore you need to stand, not for any other reason. But in most cases, when it comes to, you are going to be presenting to audiences below 15. So sit and present or stand and present, do what makes you feel more comfortable. That is the golden rule of presenting well. There's no other rule which is more important than do what makes you feel comfortable. Okay, so sit or stand is a personal preference that you have, right? But whether you're sitting or standing, like we mentioned in point number 1, sit or stand as close to the audience as possible. That is something which is very important. Okay, now standing and walking, right? So this is another big confusion people have. Should I be standing and presenting, or should I be walking around, right? This is the question people have. Now, again, the answer to that is do what makes you feel comfortable. A lot of people like just standing in one spot and presenting. Great. If that is something that you like, just stand in one spot and present. A lot of people like walking when they present, right? They like pacing when they present. If you like pacing when you present, please do that. Again, the golden rule, do what makes you feel comfortable. Now, if you are going to walk around during a presentation, if you like walking, the only thing to keep in mind is, in order not to distract the audience, ensure that you walk around in slow, steady steps. Okay, so you would have seen that a lot of people from your kind of senior management, often when they're walking and making presentations, they're doing that in slow, steady steps when they're doing it. And also when you're walking around, just another big mistake people make is, if you're walking around, just ensure that you're not constantly walking. If you have a projector and that's being projected on the screen, you're not walking in the middle of that, right? Because again, that will tend to distract your audience if you're walking in the middle of the projection and they can't see the screen very, very clearly, right? There are a few, as you get more comfortable presenting, you will realize that there are a few pros to walking around, but that only comes when you really get good at presenting, which typically if you're making, say, a day-long presentation or day-long training program that you have, and if you walk towards a certain section of the audience, that tends to wake that audience up, right? If they're sleeping, that just happens for some reason. If you walk towards the audience, they will tend to wake up and start paying more attention. But that you only do once you're very, very comfortable presenting, right? And then you're like, okay, I'm going to walk to grab people's attention as well. But you don't need to do that as a starting point. Standing or walking around is a personal preference of yours. Do what you are more comfortable with. Okay. And another thing to keep in mind, please do not take advice for and on presentations from everyone. right? Because most people will say, Arey, you should have stood up and presented. Most people don't know this subject fairly well. So my suggestion to you is, please do not take such feedback. That's why you need to come for a class like this. So somebody that's really studied the subject in depth and how you can get better on it can really give you advice on how to do it better, right? So this is another point to keep in mind. Now, the next thing is, we discussed, if you remember, posture in the first class that we did. Was a very exciting class on body language, right? And we discussed a few things around posture. The same things remain true here, whether you're sitting or whether you're standing, right? In both cases, you need to have a straight back when you're presenting. That's the simple rule of it. Straight back when you're presenting, whether you're sitting and presenting or standing and presenting. The second aspect of your body language, like we discussed in our first class, is taking care of your shoulders, right? Your shoulders at all points of time should not be droopy. You should have expansive shoulders. So straight back and expansive shoulder is what your posture needs to be when you're presenting to people. So it's the same rule as we had discussed in our first class, for those of you all that attended that first exciting class on body language, right? So simple rules about posture, nothing more to be discussed there. Now, again, we had discussed hands during the body language class. Now, what are you supposed to do with your hands when you're presenting? I'm going to move the laptop behind to show you. Okay. Here we are. What are you supposed to do with your hands? Very simply, what you're supposed to do with your hands is keep your hands in front of your stomach or chest. That's what you're supposed to do. Keep them like this, keep them like this, keep them in any position that you want. This is what you're supposed to do when you're presenting. Do not try to force any gestures, right? Do not try to force any gestures. However, what people typically tend to do, which you're not supposed to do, is please do not keep your hands here. Please do not keep your hands here. Please do not keep your hands here. These are absolute no-nos when you're presenting, right? What you are supposed to do is keep your hands in front of your stomach or chest. Keep your hands here, right? When you're doing it. Does that make sense to you? Okay, that's what you're supposed to do. Now, like I mentioned, do not force any gestures, right? Do not force any gestures, because very, very simply, if your attention is towards forcing gestures, you're not going to be able to present well. However, the more comfortable you get while presenting, you will automatically tend to move your hands or gesture according to what you're saying. So like I mentioned in the subject on body language, if you're saying this quarter we're going to see huge growth, this is how your hands must move, right? We're going to expand into all these markets. We're going to lower the cost. We're going to move very, very quickly on this particular subject. We're going to cut through this particular competition, right? So whatever that you're saying, your hand should automatically start gesturing depending on what you're talking about, right? So those are the simple rules. Straight back, expansive shoulders, hands in front of your stomach. As you get comfortable, let your hands move. However, do not try to force gestures, right? That's something which you're absolutely not supposed to do. If you're sitting and presenting, like you've seen, keep your hands on the table. Okay, keep your hands on the table. Again, let them move however that you want to. Nobody, you need to keep this in mind. No one is going to sign off on a proposal. No customer is going to give you business based on how your hands are moving, right? Nobody cares about how hands are moving. You need to be focused on your core message of what you're going to do and how you're going to do it, right? However, if you don't keep your hands in the right position, what tends to happen is your body language gets impacted, right? So the reason why you're supposed to keep your hands in front of your stomach or chest is because it'll make you feel more comfortable. Your body language will look a lot better, because if you keep your hands in any other posture, in any other way, it will automatically impact the posture that you will present, right? So that's the way you present, keep your hands. Now, make eye contact while speaking. We've discussed this during the last session as well, that the way you're supposed to make eye contact is you can have two methods of making eye contact. You can make eye contact in a zigzag way, where you look at one person from this point, look at another person here, zigzag, right? So keep making eye contact like that with people. The other way you can make eye contact is in a semicircle way. What the semicircle way basically means is you can just cover each and every one on the table like this and come back, because a lot of people are not that comfortable making zigzag contact, right? Now, eye contact is very important during presentations.
exactly like eye contact is very important when you're having one-on-one conversations with somebody, right? So if I'm having a one-on-one conversation with you and I'm busy looking somewhere else when I am doing that one-on-one conversation with you, you're going to get very offended by that. You're not going to like that too much if I'm looking somebody somewhere else and presenting, right? Exactly like that. If I'm presenting to the audience and I'm not really looking at the audience is not going to really like that too much, right? Now, when you're presenting again, the rule that is, although you can't really calculate that while making eye contact, but the rule typically says make 1 or 2 seconds eye contact per person before you move on to the next person, or 1 sentence per person and then move on to the next person, right? So you, of course, you can't calculate that. All that you need to concentrate on is really look at a person, then move on to the next person, and really just look at him, then move on to the next one, and it will be 1 to 2 seconds or 1 line per person, right? So it will end up in that particular zone of time that you do. And the other big thing to remember while presenting, which is a big mistake, and I've often seen a lot of Indian people make this mistake, is we make the mistake, don't just make eye contact with the senior most person in the room, right? Do not do that. If you have a boss or super boss sitting there, do not just make eye contact with him. It looks very bad. It's like you're ignoring the rest of the people on the table. And a lot of them are likely to be influencers to whatever decision that it is, and they will get offended by the fact that you're just looking at the senior most person. So if you have somebody really senior looking in the sitting in the room, you can give them slightly more attention by looking at them. You can do that. However, don't just look at them, right? That's a very bad way of presenting. So keep that in mind in terms of eye contact is concerned, right? So those were the few things that you need to keep in mind as far as the body language is concerned. And of course, I'm going to take questions at the end of the presentation. Right now, as far as delivering your presentation is concerned, what are the few things that you need to remember? Okay, now this is extremely important. So I want all of you all to pay attention and really focus on this particular point. Speak in the language you're comfortable with. Okay, now listen carefully. For some reason, while people are presenting, they feel that they need to stand up and speak the Queen's English. And what the Queen's English really means is they need to speak some fabulous English as soon as they stand up, right? And it's so strange. See, if you have 10 of your colleagues sitting in a particular meeting, when we're not making presentation, more often than not, we're speaking to them in English, right? Right? If you're in the South, you're doing a mix of probably, you know, Tamil and English or Telugu and English, depending on which part of the South you come from. But in the North, we're largely speaking to people in English. So a bit of Hindi, a bit of English. That's how we speak to our colleagues. But the minute those colleagues are in the same room and you need to make a so-called presentation to them, automatically we put some pressure on ourselves to speak amazing English when we 99% of the time we're talking to the same people in English, right? And then what happens is, because we're not that comfortable only speaking in English, we tend to get very, very nervous about our language, about the message in terms of standing in front of people. There's just so many things that we get nervous about, right? And that is that's when we tend to screw up, right? So what is my suggestion with you? And this is like literally at a snap of a finger. I've seen people getting much better just by implementing this one tool, and most people don't agree with me, and I'm going to spend a little more time on this, right? So what are you supposed to do if you are very well versed with English, if you're very comfortable with English, if you have a great command over the English language, please present in the English language. There's no problem with it. But if you are more comfortable speaking English, which is a mix of the two, please speak English, or please speak the mix of whatever, Tamil and English or whatever language that you're comfortable with. Do that, because what people care about, what your customers care about, what your stakeholders care about is not the quality of your English. What they care about is this person getting the message across in a smart way, in a confident way. That's what they care about much more than what your command over the English language is. Now look at this situation. If you're going to make, say, a presentation to a client, do you think the client is going to make a decision based on saying, यार वो जो पहला वेंडर था ना उसकी इंग्लिश बहुत अच्छी थी तो उसको बिजनेस दे देते हैं, राइट? इसकी ना थोड़ी इंग्लिश में प्रॉब्लम था तो नहीं, इसको नहीं देना, उसको देना है प्रोजेक्ट, राइट? That's not how any of us think. But for some reason, we've grown up thinking that the minute there's a presentation, we need to stand and speak pure English, and then we take huge tension about it and we stop making good presentations, right? So stop. Speak in the language that you're comfortable in. Right now, The only reason why I would recommend each one of you all to improve your command over the English language, there's just one reason for it. Because in the odd case that there is somebody in that audience that, say, if you're from the north and there is somebody in that audience who's an expat, or there is somebody from the audience that doesn't understand Hindi, then you cannot use English. Even if one person from the audience does not understand that particular language, then you are compelled to use English primarily, right? So the reason behind using English is only if somebody from the audience doesn't understand English. Otherwise, you can use English, but there could be a lot of cases, and the more senior you become, you're going to be dealing with all kinds of people, and a lot of them, the only language they could know is English, right? And that's why you need to better your command over the English. However, if everybody in the room is comfortable with Hindi or the local tongue and English, please go ahead with that. Please do not put additional pressure on yourself to speak the Queen's English. Okay, this is a big point, and this will help you in a big way if you take it seriously. Now, what a lot of people do is, a lot of people do not listen to people that have taken years studying this particular subject like me, and they will speak to some of their colleagues that have got no idea about it, and they'll say, nahi yaar, English bahut zaruri hai, English mein hi kar presentation, and they continue doing that and they continue screwing up. Okay, I have seen very senior people across the board that are not that comfortable with English but are tremendous achievers and at the top of their game, because they know that the focus needs to be in terms of delivering the message well, convincing my audience, getting what I need, than it is to just speak great English, right? So keep that suggestion in mind, and I'll take questions around it later. Now, the second one is understand your message, don't learn it by heart. Okay, and I'd like to share a quote here. So Dale Carnegie, there's a company called Dale Carnegie, and there's a very famous author as well called Dale Carnegie, right? And he would train a lot of the American presidents close to, I think, 80 years back in terms of public speaking better. So he had a very nice quote. Okay, so listen to it carefully. He had a quote that said, he said, there are 3 speeches for every one that you make. Okay, and he said, number 1, it's the one that you prepare. Number 2, it's the one that you actually go and make. And number 3, it's the one that you wish you made, right? So he said there are 3 speeches for every one that you make: the one that you prepare, the one that you make, the one that you wish you made. Okay, now while delivering your message, keep in mind that what you prepare and what will come out of your mouth eventually will always be different, right? So it will never be the same, and it'll literally start from the first word you will say. When you're making a presentation, you'd probably prepare in your head saying, you know what, I'm going to say this first line, I'm going to say this first line like this, I'm going to say this first paragraph like this when I go to present. And often you will end up saying that first line itself, you'll end up saying something else, right? Because for every speech, there's the one that you prepare and the one that you give. And this happens to every human being, right? That they'll prepare something else, they'll give something else, right? So you're not the only one that this is happening to. As a matter of fact, even when you're preparing and rehearsing for your presentation, every rehearsal that you do will be slightly different from the other. And we often get very nervous during the rehearsal stage itself, saying, man, everyone is different, right? First I'm saying good morning, then I'm saying something else. I'm going to screw up in the presentation. No, that's the wrong way of thinking about it, right? Exactly what our teachers told us in school and what we often tell our kids: do not by heart the content, right? Do not ratta maro the subject. Understand that particular subject very well in your head and then speak it in your own way. Exactly like our teachers told us to then understand the message and then write it in your own words. Exactly like that. Understand the message of your presentation and then put it across in your own words. You don't need to by heart anything, because the more you by heart it, the more you're likely to put stress on your memory, the more likely you are to get nervous, because what you prepare and what's going to come out of your mouth will always be different. Okay, so that's the other thing that I want you to know. Understand your message. Don't learn it by heart. This is a presentation. It's not some speech that you're supposed to make. Okay, now the third point is make your presentations interactive. Okay, now what do I mean by interactive? 2 or 3 very simple things that you need to do. Exactly like during this presentation, I'm checking on you. Of course, this is a Zoom call. We have close to 250 people on the call. So I can't really make it that interactive, but every once in a while, I'm asking you a question saying, if you're clear, say yes, right? If this, we're trying to make it as interactive as we possibly can in a session like this. However, when you're presenting in front of people, say 15, 20 people sitting in front of you, from time to time, from probably every slide, every section, keep checking in on that particular audience, right? Saying that, are you clear? Have I made myself clear? Do you have any questions? So that's what you want to do. Literally at the end of every section, at least, you want to keep checking in on them to make it interactive, and you don't want to make it a one-way street, right? The only possible time where you need to make it more one-way is when you have a large audience, whether it's on Zoom or whether they're sitting or standing in front of you, right? Where it becomes largely one-way. But most of y'all are going to deal with smaller audiences. So keep checking in on the audience, saying, are you clear? Do you have any questions? So that is something that you need to do, right? Now, the second sub point is, don't look into the presentation, look at the audience, right? A lot of times what people do is they're busy looking into the presentation and they're talking into the presentation. And what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to look into the presentation and then you're supposed to talk to the people. Because if you keep talking into the presentation, the audience will totally lose you and be not interested in the presentation, because they'll often barely be able to hear you if you're looking into the presentation and speaking and not looking into the audience and speaking. So what you're supposed to do, look at your point, then look at the audience and speak that point out. That's what you're supposed to do. Okay. Now, the third point is, carry notes or prepare a PPT. Don't do both. Okay. This is again a big mistake that people make. Now, when you're preparing, you may make all the notes that you want to make around what you want to say, but it's an absolutely bad idea to have a PPT which is on screen and also carry notes, because what tends to happen is then people are not clear. The presenter is confused between whether I should look at the PPT or whether I should look at the notes, right? And in that particular confusion, he loses his connect with the audience, right? So what I suggest to people is, if you have a PPT, do not carry notes. If you're making some kind of a speech, or if you're making a presentation where you don't actually have a PPT with you, in that particular situation, please carry notes, right? In that particular situation, please don't rely on your memory. Please carry notes if you don't have a PPT. Even if you're on an important con call where you're not presenting, but you still need to articulate your views to a lot of people, right? There's no PPT. Please ensure that you made notes of what you want to say, and please ensure that you look at those notes and talk, because what you want to focus on is on delivering the message in a more powerful way. You don't want to be focusing on by-hearting the message. And somehow in India, we are so obsessed with this idea of by-hearting stuff. Oh, I shouldn't look at notes when I talk. I should know everything in my head. How can I not know everything in my head? We're so obsessed with this idea of by-hearting. Nobody cares about you memorizing the entire presentation, right? Ensure that you carry notes, that you look at each and every point and put that point forward. And in one of our subsequent sessions, we'll also tell you on how to go about making those notes. Okay. Yeah. Don't try to copy someone else. Let your personality show. Okay. Very important point here. I often, again, I'm giving you political examples, but this has got nothing to do with politics. So please don't get into commenting on the political side of stuff. These are just examples of public figures that we know that most of us consider as good public speakers, right? So don't try to copy anybody else. Let your personality show. So I think two kind of prime ministers that we've had in the past that most people consider to be good public speakers. I think our current Prime Minister, Narendra Modi, is a very good public speaker. He's known all around the world for being a good public speaker. And previously, I think Atal Bihari Vajpayee also was known to be a very good public speaker, right? Everybody would really admire him for those skills. However, both these people had totally different styles of presenting, right? Because they were totally different personalities, and they present in their own personality, right? So my suggestion to each one of y'all is, please don't try to copy somebody else's style of presenting just because you say like their style of presenting. When you are presenting, let your personality show, which means just be yourself, because the more you try to copy somebody else, the more you're going to fail at it. Okay. I'll give you another example around this. A lot of people ask me the question of humor, right? Should I be humorous during my presentation? And my simple answer to them is that if you are a funny person in real life, if you love cracking jokes, if that is who you are in your real life, if you go on stage, it is totally fine to be humorous, to be funny, because all of us like a little bit of humor in our lives and even in our business presentations, right? And we'll get into the advanced presentation class, how to, what that humor should be about. So we'll get into it later. But if you are funny in real life, ensure that you bring that sense of humor or bring that side of your personality to the presentation. But if you're somebody that's not the kind to crack jokes, you don't need to be funny just because the presenter before you was funny, right? Because your joke is going to fall flat on its face, right? If you try to be funny just because somebody else was funny. So don't try to copy somebody else. Be your own self, right? That's what you're supposed to do. Okay. And the last point of this particular masterclass is work on your energy, right? Use an energetic tone of voice when you're speaking. People hate people that speak in a monotonous way, right? With no energy which is put into that. People hate that particular thing. If for those of you all that attended the class on body language on how to speak impactfully, we got very little time to address the topic of speaking impactfully, but we covered tone, and that is what we're speaking about, right? So speak in an energetic tone of voice. For those of y'all who weren't a part of that particular thing, once you become a member, you'll be able to access the self-paced class. For whatever classes that you missed, you'll be able to access that particular class. So go and check that particular class